Here we go. We are live. Okay, good. Great. Okay. I don't need to watch myself on Zoom, but it is happening. Okay. Now we just have to use the extremely fragile Kickstarter technology of
Good luck.
of adding it to the page. Huh? Huh? I'm always curious about the because I started playing Helldivers, right? Like not like on my break, not well. It came. I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm perpetually like 4 years behind on video games.
It's actually the
Like,
best way to be because everything's like a little cheaper and you can avoid the bad stuff.
well, I started playing Dark Souls 3 because Brendan was really into Elden Ring. So I'm like, okay, I finally should play Dark Souls 3. Incredible experience, great, absolutely wonderful. You know, every problem in the game is solved, every graphics issue is resolved. I am playing a game that is 5 years out of date, so like everything's wonderful. But I actually decided, okay, I'm gonna pay full price for Helldivers. Like
Okay.
they've done a good job. So you know, on my break, I was like, let's do this. It's like a co-op board game, right? It's like a co-op team game. Love
Right.
it. Like we start playing it, we start doing stuff, and then they start nerfing weapons that work in the name of balance, despite it being a PvE game. So this is their thing is that they're going to balance the game by saying 70% of you bring this weapon, we have to fix it by nerfing it. Which as a game designer is a hole that I can see myself falling down, if that makes sense. Like this playbook
Yes.
is too good is different than all the other playbooks aren't good enough, right? So then apparently the devs get on and are like live streaming playing the game, and it's clear they've like never played the game before. And like that's like my personal nightmare.
Oh no.
It's like getting on and being like, I'm the lead designer for this game. I have no idea how it works. Is like that's for me the nightmare condition now.
Well, there used to be like I won't name names, but there were Kickstarter launches that we would watch, and I would always watch the designer teach video because it was abundantly clear if they had actually played their own game, especially in the earlier days of Kickstarter, where you'd see someone playing like, oh, they've never booted up Tabletop Simulator. And there's a reason they're not sharing the rule book.
That is a rough.
So what do you think of Helldivers more broadly? Are you
Okay,
in?
so like if we take out the recent nerfs upon buffs upon nerfs, like it's fucking incredible. Like
Yeah.
there's a couple of things I think are really genius about it, which is great for us to talk about while we wait to launch this. If anybody's here watching, which I think is there is not. There's two people. I had two people. You're gonna get the super cool Mark and Cole talk about Helldivers before we actually
Sorry.
get down to business. No, it's perfect. It's wonderful. So there's two things I think are really cool about it. One is I think it's a co-op board game in real time. Like you have these resources, you have a map, you have these things you got to get done. Sure, like you have to shoot bugs, but like once you get up to the higher levels, the shooting bugs is not the problem. The organizing yourselves in real time, like the guys I play with, there's three of us we play together regularly. We are very effective because we are communicating. So it feels like playing Spirit Island on fast forward. Like everything's happening so quickly. We have kind of different abilities, but not really, and it's incredible. And I think that there's something really interesting about the satire lens, which I thought was just kind of cute and fun, but that it actually makes it so that when you think about playing the game, like let's say the game was straight, right? And there's a whole bunch of really evil bugs and they're destroying everything.
Right.
At some point in play, Cole, wouldn't you be like, but are we the bad guys?
Well, sure. And also I think there's something monotonous about extermination. Do you know what I mean? Like this is maybe like a very cynical take. And the humor in that game, it just gives it a little bit of bounce in its step.
Yeah.
Like because I was initially, I mean, I think like a lot of people I'm like inherently suspicious of AAA games. I almost never play
Right,
them.
right,
And
yeah,
so whenever everyone's like, "Oh, we're playing Helldivers," I'm like, "Yeah, I don't. Whatever. That's the flavor of the
whatever.
month. I'm gonna continue playing StarCraft 2." And then,
Re-
um,
really into Dwarf Fortress.
yeah, exactly, right. I have my keyboard overlay.
Right, yeah.
And I think I was shocked by how funny it was, and also like shooters have the best physical humor. It's like why I love Counter-Strike, despite how problematic it is, because
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
extremely funny. Because you like threw a grenade and it bounced off your friend's head and then like blew up half your. I mean, it just there's a lot of
So
that stuff that happens.
so the satire right in Helldivers that I think is great is you never ask, are we the baddies? Because the game canonically has told you, yes.
Oh, I mean,
Yes.
the name of my brother's like ship is the U.S. Family Values.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Like you never like you have this weird and I think there's something here around like how I felt when there's this whole like telling lies is the best way to tell the truth kind of weirdness of 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's nothing like a satire to reveal the truth in a world where everything is lies, right? Like where you end up in a moment where you're like, I'm really interested in surviving this wave of bugs. And then you throw your little grenade and it says, you'll never take our way of life. And you're like, God damn it.
Right.
This is we're just America, right? Like we're just America, and like, and so we had big discussions in the office about like, is it possible to truly satirize fascism without accidentally kind of like feeding some fascism to people? Because Warhammer 40K, Starship Troopers, Helldivers, like these aren't like big smart works that are going to undermine people's belief in say like I don't know shitty immigration policy. Like I'm
So
not of that belief. But do they actually ironically do the opposite where you're like, but I kind of want to kill the bugs?
okay, so I have a true non sequitur here, like of the highest order.
Oh,
But
wonderful.
this is my biggest problem with like Chaplin's The Great Dictator, which,
Yeah.
as among Chaplin scholars, people do not like that movie. They're like,
Oh, really?
they're like it's preachy, it's weird. He is not like comfortable like in using all this dialogue. But the problem with it also is that the central speech where the little barber gives the speech about universal humanity um, is essentially a populist, like almost fascist rhetorical play that is about building a better world. It just
Mm.
happens to be better in a way that the left likes. And so it's always funny when I like, especially in the first Trump term, where you saw people like posting that video all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I agree with all this stuff, but like it's also like a little fashy. Like he's on a pedestal. He's using the apparatus of fascism to, present a socialist message or something. And because I do think that there's always this problem where any engagement with those ideas um, is a little, it can be a little like toxic, not in the modern sense, but in the sense that you can't
Yeah,
help
yeah,
but like come
yeah,
away
yeah,
with oily
yeah.
fingers, right?
Well,
I
but
I
there's
mean, I think to me, what makes Helldivers work is the way that game draws its tension is really funny. Like I love the fact that you have to do those stupid DDR puzzles. I
yes.
think it is to me that it has become my new litmus test for talking to design folks, because a lot of people I know hate that game because they have to play this like funny little arrow key
Oh, it's
puzzle,
hilarious. Like
and it's
bombs are
so
going off.
yeah, it's
Like
so
somebody's
fun.
going to murder you, and you're like, left, up, down, right. Fuck.
Yeah, and like starting it over, your friends are like, "Hurry, hurry!"
All right, what are you doing? Or famously, as Connor, my friend, said to me, the thing about calling in for supply mark, or the thing about calling in for the retrieval mark, extraction mark, is you got to do it right. It's like, do not. It's like, thanks, Connor. Got killed, but thank you. That's very helpful. I think there's a thing there where, ironically, playing the game because I've played the game a lot on solo because I like doing sniper like
Mhm.
stealthy stuff, right? So I'll play like a level 4 or 5 out of level 9, like bot mission, where like shooting the bots in the head means they're done, right? So you have this like
Mhm.
sniper feel, and you're going around the map. And there have been moments where I'm like genuinely terrified of running away from 500 really angry robots, and I'm alone, and like there's just no like the whole thing is so stupid. Like, what am I even doing on this planet? In which I'm like, is this an effective satire of fascism?
Oh,
That like
interesting.
that like
Yes.
I'm here alone. If I die, they'll just send another one. My life is meaningless. These goals are meaningless. These robots are rightfully angry. That there's a part of me that's like, I think that might actually convince a kid to like not join the military without thinking it through.
Sure. No, I think that's very. I think that's very well put, because there are like the game does not let you like slide. I think this is why the humor is important, because you have to like punctuate these moments and be
Yeah,
like, hey,
yeah,
reminder, isn't this kind of like screwed up a little bit?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I love how bloody you get, and the way blood works in the visual language of the game, because you just look like you're like covered in paint, like you feel dirty at the end of every
yeah,
scenario, and I'm like, this
yeah.
isn't good.
Well, and I think the humor, like there's different levels of the humor. The first level of being like, silly, when the tips come up on the screen, like, have you ever talked to an automaton? Well, don't, because that's treason, right? Like
Yeah.
that little bit is really good. But like the way the maps work and stuff, I think is really fascinating from the perspective of one of our constraints as designers, right, is that we want to give you this sense of something being big. Like the woodland needs to be really big and root. Like you have to feel like you're fighting a whole war over a place that actually matters. That like
Mm-hmm.
right. And so, but then also there need to be 12 spaces so that because if there were 30 spaces or 50 spaces, it would feel like a radically different game. And so I
Sure.
think that like Helldivers does this funny thing where you're like, if you actually get a tape measure out, the whole map's only like 1,000 meters wide, except your movement speed and the way you move through the space means when you're hustling across the map, you're like, oh my god, it's taking forever. I'm never gonna make it there. They're gonna leave without me, right?
Yes.
1,000 meters, guys. Like it's like a city block that you're having 17 different confrontations over, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot to learn there as a designer about the specificity, and then again, how you can ruin that specificity by
I th-
deciding to nerf every weapon people are using.
I think I really wanted to like Destiny 2, but could never it could never work for me. I think I just never had like the time to give it the proper investment. And I
Yeah.
think Helldivers gave me what I think other people get from Destiny 2, which is the sense of like the open world shooter, which
Hmm.
is really, I mean, it's amazing how on rails a lot of the more co-op shooters are. Where in Helldivers, especially the harder missions, I feel like you get presented with these puzzles and you have to figure out like what order are you going to do and do things, how aggressive do you want to be. Um,
How much can
and
you split up? Like, do you have four
yeah,
people that can work together, so you do teams of two, or are you going to have to go place to place as a group?
when
Yeah.
we started dividing into two teams of two, I thought the game really opened up because it got way harder, and
Yep.
then we would make like absolute mistakes where one team would have a walk in the park and the other team would be just slammed.
Like, and they'd be destroyed, and then you're like, well, the other side of the map's that way, so I guess we'll call you in here
Yeah.
and go. All right. Well, this is it. We're here. I don't know if there's literally it's a button that says launch. I don't know if I need to share my screen, but here we go. This is always the most exciting part. Cole, do you have any like do you guys have a ritual for when you hit go?
So I always get a McDonald's breakfast. The
Yeah,
cheapest breakfast is my egg McNuffin is a Kickstarter launch day thing.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
usually we let the newest person on the staff press the button.
Oh, that's
Isn't
adorable.
this?
Okay, well
Oh yes.
we actually have a tradition that we've had for years where we get breakfast burritos because we're in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So
Yeah.
everybody puts in their breakfast burrito order. We got a crowd of people sitting out there watching. We have some folks from the community, like people that play test with us and stuff, come by if they're willing to get up this early. So, but yeah, I guess I have to push the button. Although I like the idea of letting somebody new push the button. We'll do that next time. Here we go. Ooh, ooh, ooh. It's live. Okay.
Oh, it always like no matter how many of these you run, right? It's always a I always get a little
Well, that is the thing I think people don't understand. Like we had this conversation the other day where you said when you have a new employee, you sit them down and say, "Hey, guess what? You work in entertainment,
yeah.
right?" Like I think I worked in this industry for a good solid like 7 or 8 years, thinking we were IKEA furniture designers. Like we just make good things and people value them or whatever. And then we had a hit or two, and then I realized, oh my god, the hits that we have are not fundamentally better or something than the ones that
Mm,
aren't hits. There's a kind of randomness to it where Root, you might in retrospect be like, Root is better than another of my games by 2%, but it doesn't sell 2% better. It sells
Right.
3,000,000% better. And that's like a weird part of the job.
Yeah, it's so strange. I mean, I think, yeah, especially something like Root, where the players who are really getting into Root right now are far away from me, like in terms of sensibility and play style. And it's actually been one reason why we have often brought in different designers to work on expansions, because we want to make sure that like the people working on Root are at the vanguard of Root.
Oh, like they're current with like whatever's going on in the Root space.
I want to bring up the page here. I got to see the little,
You see the numbers go?
well, so we've waffled between back at Kickstarter and trying to like figure out just which platform suits which product best. And the thing that Kickstarter has, it doesn't, is a rolling number counter. And I'm telling you, it's great. Top tier.
Top tier. Would recommend. Yeah, there is something pretty exciting about watching the numbers go. BackerKit has the what is it, the little campaign, uh, the campaign train, trying to get people
Yes,
on the
you got to
train,
keep the train.
right?
But
Keep the
it's
train
like that
going.
small. I mean, it reminds. It's like slot machine UI design, where it's like getting the little rotate of the number, like the exact right timing. Because I will like my wife will tell me that if we're running a Kickstarter, she'll like just keep it on. She'll like put it on the TV, just
Yeah,
as
right.
as just kind of as it's around in the house.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing. I don't know if I've ever told you before about how my mother does these. My mom is not a gamer, like not at all. Like when we used to play, she'll play poker maybe, but like when we used to play chess, as kids, like my dad played with us. She didn't want to deal with that at all. Um, she will wait to back until there's some number that she likes, like it'll be like $200,000, or in the case of
Right.
Avatar, $3 million, and she'll wait until it's just before that number, and then she'll jump in and she'll pledge, right? And then she'll call me and be like, "Mark, did you see what I did?" Like, I did not. It's like, well, I pushed you over $3 million. That was my pledge that got you got you over $3 million. And I'll say like, well, you don't need to do this. I'll just give you books. Like, you're my mom. I'll just drop it. She's like, I don't want your books. That's fine. No, this is my support for you. And
Sure.
I'm like, I don't think I'm not sure you 100% get how this works.
Right. You're
But
NPR to her. She wants to have the matching offer.
there you go. Yeah, right.
So where do you guys? I mean, where are the? So I think when we do launch our Kickstarters, we always like divide who gets which social media.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
so that someone's like, oh, I really want to be on the Reddit team or whatever. Just so we kind of divide our responses. But we used to make like little command centers where you'd have like 4 or 5 people answering questions in different spots.
I think we've talked about this before too. The different volume, like just knowing you're not going to have 30,000 people for a tabletop RPG project usually makes it
Right.
so that we have one. Kate handles all our social media, and it's just like they're just different kind of vibes. But we do have a lot of like division because we're like, you know, somebody has to buy the burritos, somebody has to set up the projector for everybody to watch,
Right.
somebody has to hit go. Um, so like there is a lot of division, but yeah, I can't. For some reason, this is not embedding properly. So people who are here and watching us, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for being
they're
here.
it's whoever was on my Twitter this morning or however you found this. Um,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
should
it's good.
post on Blue Sky. I'll post on Blue Sky.
Right now, there's Blue Sky and Mastodon and this and that. So, but yeah, like I think the thing we wanted to, that we're moving here. Things are happening. We already got a couple, 2 dozen backers rolling here. I'm curious now to talk about here, kind of sitting here talking about other stuff, but like root, um, roots ruins as a part of the game. We've been talking now for, because I think we signed the original contract in 2019. So we've now been doing Root with you guys for basically 5 years. Like this is like the
That's
5 year
yeah,
anniversary. And I know that when we first sat down to talk about the ruins, there was a lot of like, Like we just there's a like it felt like there was a lot there, and it wasn't clear how that was going to play out. And I'm kind of
Mhm.
curious now, looking back on it, like what role did you want the ruins to serve in that initial design? Like what was the goal for the ruins in Route 1.0?
Well, you wanted, so I think the ruins have a couple important like elements. One is that Root's world building, as you know, is like extremely horizontal.
Right. Yeah.
It's like,
Yep.
so with every expansion, it's like it's new factions or kind of broadening the present of the game. But we're not really broad, like, but the root doesn't or didn't, especially at the beginning, have like a specific past. But that doesn't mean there wasn't a past. It's just, I mean, one thing that is always very alarming when you like read like a medieval text is how little awareness of the past there is. There's like a sense of like biblical
Interesting.
past, but I mean, it's really, I mean, there's an amazing book by James Gleick called Time Travel. And the first centuries, which is the first time people celebrated the 100-year-old anniversary of something, it's like a late 19th century invention.
What?
And the notion of time travel there. So one of the most interesting parts where he talks about as an exercise, he tried to figure out how he could find the oldest time travel narrative, expecting that there'd be some Greek story.
Yeah.
It's
Like
and no, it's like H.G. Wells. It is, you know, and there's some other examples. There's a
I am. Everybody at home knows. I usually say, "You can't see my face. You can't see my face." I'm shocked and horrified.
no, it is amazing. There, William Morris, that's the arts and crafts guy. He has a novel that is like kind of a time travel novel, and you get like Twain, the you know, the Connecticut Yankee, and King Arthur's Court, and like you have like dream stories, but like actually a person traveling through time and like the imagining of the past. And there's all these really funny things that happen, like when like for instance, when you read like Greek stories about the Bronze Age, they're acting often as if they're at like a remove of like 80 years, like 2 or 3 generations, when they were 600 years away. But in a
Whoa.
lot of like pre-literate societies, you just don't have an engagement with like what we would call like the midterm past, you know.
Okay. Got
So
it.
like, and in fact, you can see this phenomenon in US history right now, because a lot of people on this chat generally know probably more about like the Declaration of Independence than they know about like the presidential elections of the 1840s.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure. There's a
Right.
mythic past that's
Yeah, there's
preceded
like the
by
mythic past,
Hamilton.
and then like a
Right.
bunch of stuff happened, and then like maybe World War II, which would be at the limit. But let me tell you, like your children and your children's children will find World War II as obscure as like the Bull Moose Party.
But is that true when we have the History Channel, which is obsessed with like three things: ancient aliens, right, or some sort
Yeah,
of
but
weird
what
spooky
will
other
happen to
thing?
the History Channel? I mean, here's the thing. So that was the History Channel that I feel like you and I grew up with.
True.
But
True.
I was at a hotel recently and I turned on the History Channel, and it was mostly The Secret of Oak Island or
Oh,
whatever,
right.
or
Okay.
whatever the
Sure.
heck
For sure. But
that's
are they also shifting like to Vietnam, right? Like
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're kind
winter
of
shifts are,
moving to
yeah,
that.
and it becomes the Gulf War, right? Like so like there's a moving bubble of history that's really stuff that people I know can remember, right? Whereas
Right. So, and then, but there's this problem, which is when you walk down the street, there are buildings that you walk by. I mean, maybe if you're not in Albuquerque, but in other places that are really old, and they're
oh no,
just,
Albuquerque is very very old, older
oh
than
yeah,
other
Albuquerque is
places,
super old. What am I saying?
but
So
it's all Spanish, right? It's
yes, correct.
yeah, five
I
hundred years old.
I continue to have this problem where I always think about like Dallas and, well, even living it up here in the Twin Cities are such a new city.
Yes, great.
And
Yep,
even like
yep.
Indiana, weirdly, if you're in like or where was I? I was in Cincinnati, and I was like, wow, this city just feels like so old. And it's because it is. It's, you know, it's 100 years
Yes,
older than
100. Yeah,
Minneapolis.
yeah. But
Um,
Phoenix,
but
Phoenix is actually 15 minutes old. They just rolled over all the
yeah,
Apple
this wrong. But yeah,
yesterday, and
but you're right. You go into some of the older Spanish cities, and I mean, like San Antonio is a good example in Texas. But anyway, so like the past is still there.
yeah,
It just isn't getting remembered. And so when we were working on Oath, not Oath, whoa, when I was working on Root, I really wanted there to be like the sense of something that you couldn't really get access to. And then there was a convenient mechanical thing with like putting the items there and then having slots open up, because I wanted to see like, well, that part of the past is getting kind of brushed away. But what precisely the ruins were, I mean, I remember Kyle like, what do you mean by ruin? And I'm like, it shouldn't look like any faction in the game's
right.
ruins.
They're
It
not
needs to,
bird ruins or
yeah, they're just like, it's closer to like a stone circle or something. Um, And then it just sat there. It just sat there on the edge of the game. And every once in a while we would do a faction, but we really didn't know what way Root was going to grow. And Root ended up growing in this like very wide horizontal way, and it didn't grow down. But the RPG created a bit of a problem because and I always refer people to the RPG when they want to know more about like how Root's world works, because I say like, look, the team at Magpie, they had to think about these things at a level a level of rigor that did not have to exist for the actual like board game.
It's a great example in the most easy sense possible is, where the hell does the Marquise de Cat come from?
Yes, exactly.
What world is this cat from? Are they not of the Woodland? Are they from just outside the Woodland? Is there a whole cat empire way outside the Woodland? Like, these are questions we always joke. It's the Arrested Development bit where Job tries to sell Michael the steal a banana grabber, and there's a line where he says, "Why would one banana want to steal another banana?" It's like my whole career is answering, why would one banana want to steal another banana?
And there are like, and actually there are ways, and I think y'all have done a great job of like answering those questions. It's not that they're unanswerable. It's just that they are not answerable in a meaningful way within the scope of the board game.
One of the best ones in the new material is, what are the keepers doing? Like, what's the plan? Like, what?
Yes.
Like they go into the forest, they get these artifacts. Well, wouldn't they go into the ruins to get the artifacts? But then you have these questions of like, but a ruin inside a clearing is kind of an explored space.
Yes.
Right? Like you would imagine that over the years, scavengers, thieves, squatters, spies, whoever, are going to use this ruin as kind of a base. So the first couple levels of the ruin, whatever's there, has been pilfered long, long ago. So we always interpreted the keepers as finding ruins, finding areas deep in the forest, like
right.
Way,
it's like a different class of ruin. Like surely there are ruins everywhere, right?
Right.
And this is the remarkable thing about especially like advances in archaeology is people are like, oh yeah, there are. I mean, especially in the context of the United States, people will say like, oh, there's a whole city here that we weren't looking for the right thing.
That still blows my mind that like all of Seattle is built on top of old Seattle. Is still like mind blowing to me.
Sunk a little bit.
So like answering this question of what are the keepers, you don't have to answer that question, right? The keepers set up way stations. You draw a card, you roll some dice, and the thing happens. And we assume there's a lot of fiction in the board game that's occurred, individual commanders, individual people, that all is rolled up into that sense of, you took your action, you rolled the dice, you did the thing, whatever, and it's done. But with the RPG, we live in that moment.
Right. And this is why when we're doing world building together, the thing that and you know this, but I'll tell it to everybody. The kind of secret is that there are these rules. There are these like core rules that are really like statements of ethos. It's about the character of the world. And those rules exist to make sure that the world building and the character design and the narrative design that's been done harmonizes. But the actual content of what is created, it matters a lot for the role playing game, but it actually allows us to have. I love our collaboration because I feel like I'm able to offer extremely wide berth and say like, look, you can do whatever you want so long as you don't break any of the rules.
Right. Yeah. Like for example, the keepers have to be interested in relics. Like that's
right. Yep, that's a rule. And also like you can't have like there's no magic in the world.
There's no magic, right?
There's no magic. And it's like there are these just like core rules that as long as those lines to get crossed, there's like a huge, there's this huge expanse. And then as stuff builds out, I mean, when we were working on the upcoming factions for Root, like part of what I've been doing is just rereading the role playing game and just trying to as a way of like situating myself in the world. In the way that I remember when, I mean, I don't know if when we were talking about the Avatar role playing game many years ago, and you were asking them about some consistency point, and they like directed you to the fan wiki.
Yep.
And I think about that all the time because I'm like, yeah, like of course these documents are all going to be done in collaboration. And I mean, a more erudite example is there's this fantasy writer sci-fi writer named Gene Wolfe, who famously like used the Gene Wolfe fan listservs and documentation in the 90s to help inform some of the world building, to like check his own work.
Like, yeah, exactly. The fans are going to do it better than you ever will. And for Avatar, we see that like we post something and like a day later, it's on the fan wiki, well documented and sourced, and we're kind of shocked that it's like it's there. It's part of the world already.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think the same is true for Root, where it's like we have these big rules like, you know, bears, deer, they kind of occupy this other mythical space, and like you can't really play a whale. That doesn't work. Like
Right.
what would that look? That's so silly. I mean, a beaver, yeah, sure, fine, yeah, no
That's
problem.
fine.
But
Right.
like,
Right.
yeah, but not a frog, yeah, sure. Like there's these boundaries that are soft and hard, but they all kind of add up to, I think, at some level, a sense of Root's aesthetic and political, like like boundaries, right? So we can
Yeah.
have these kinds of conflicts, but not those kinds of conflicts, right? We can't have a magical conflict that means that there's somebody who has a magic spell that can destroy clearings. That's never going to be the scope of the game, because in some ways that would ruin the game.
Right.
Right? The Marcusat gets a hold of that, and then they use it to nuke a couple of clearings, and then we're done. Right? That's it. That's the end of
And
the
it
game.
doesn't, like, if that were within the logic of the game, it wouldn't produce the game itself. Like, it has to be self-reinforcing to a degree. I mean, one thing that I love about the role-playing game, and something that I always tell people about how it's designed, is that it takes the imperatives of the board game really seriously. Like, there are clearings. The way it sort of packages the
Yeah.
experience and structures everything is so in line with like the same governing logic that the board game uses. It's just using it for completely different effect, because you like
Right.
can't, you just can't do that within the board game.
Well, the irony of it is that like we're always looking at, like, I don't know how to put this, but like the joy of design is often very rarely that you get to do whatever you want. I don't know if
Right.
that makes sense. Like
Yeah, no, it
like
makes total
like
sense.
like I think sometimes people think like, oh, you're a game designer, you can make any game you want, and I'm like, I could, but that's actually not particularly interesting. I would need some some boundaries, and so the way that the Root board game became kind of like our North Star, but also our grounding, right? Like, okay, gear has to matter. Why does gear matter? Well, it matters to the vagabond in the board game. So we
Mhm.
want to take that really seriously and say, what does it look like to find or build or manufacture gear? Why is the tinker a powerful
Right.
character, right? The clearings, like you could take the clearings and be like, yeah, there's these 12 clearings, but like there are really actually 500 clearings, and these are just the 12 most important. You're like, well,
Mhm.
now holding a clearing is meaningless, because you would have to hold 100 clearings before it's meaningful. So trying to take the logic of the board game that like there are these powers and they care about these things really, I think, inspired us to create a game that does that. And when when we work, so I have the books right here because I've been working on the new book, and um, we were working on the part of the book where we talk about what you do to play the board game and the RPG together. And we had budgeted like 20 pages for it or something like that. And Brendan came to me and was like, "So I wrote it all, and it's not very long. Like you play the board game and then you play the RPG. That's what happens. It's kind of back to back." And so we ended up with this 2 pages using the board game as 2 pages, which is basically like play the board game, play a couple turns of the board game. Okay, now figure out where your vagabonds are,
Mhm.
have adventures, then play another turn of the board game, and that's how they work together, because
Yeah.
the two are so well integrated that there's not really a big conversion from one to the other.
Well, one thing that you've talked about is the fact that the root RPG can be very like world led or GM led, because like
Yeah,
basically there is this big clock turning, and then that is informing some of the core level events that the players have to react to, as opposed to dropping the players in a world with a bunch of like interact buttons where they move around and they just press like, I'm going to interact with whatever this thing is. And I think the integration with the board game is very funny, because if you don't want to take that role as the GM, like literally you can just look at any root after action, go to the BGG forums, pick a root game that someone wrote a report on, and then use that for your story notes.
I didn't even think about that. You don't even have to run the game yourself. Just go online and read about somebody's game, and then
And
be like, I'm picking up right there, right? So, oh,
right.
I hate to interrupt you, but we have funded 20 minutes
Woo!
in. Woo! Thank you, 241 backers. Exciting stuff. Thank you. As Cole said when we started, if you weren't here, y'all might think, oh yeah, this is easy. They put up some root stuff and it funds, but like we never know, guys, if it's
Yeah.
gonna be like fun in 20 minutes or if you're gonna spend your first 5 days trying to get enough together to cross the finish line. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It means an incredible amount to us.
Yeah, it's a bit. I mean, I always think before I launched the first Premiere Kickstarter, I took a tape measure out to my garage and measured it because I was trying to figure out if I got less than like a 500 backers, could I hand assemble the copies in my garage? And so, like a few days before launching, I was just like, well, I really got to make sure that we could run it that way.
I mean, we did a thing that I will never forget, which is that Marissa and I promised for our very first Kickstarter, which was a Shakespearean RPG, where you played Shakespearean characters arguing with Shakespeare about the script. So you're like, playing Ophelia, and I think the fact that I drowned myself is absolutely ridiculous. So I would like to not do that and continue to be a part of the story. And you roll dice to find out what happens, right? Whether you're able to convince the director to let you play a different role. And we promised to send the book to schools as well without calculating the shipping on what that would also cost, right? And so, like, yeah, when you're getting started, you're just like, man, every little bit is just like you're just figuring it out as you go. So
And it's so easy in those early Kickstarters to make. If you, a very small uh, bad guess can really sink you.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, we got lucky that we were able to send it to all the schools because people had to fill out a form and say, okay, this is the school I want to send it to, and so we got lucky that we were able to manage it. But yeah, it was pretty wild. So, but yeah, like I think that this idea of root as growing out instead of down, right? Like not you don't have a new supplement that's like a new expansion that's like, okay, now we're going to give the Makasat like 17 new types of units,
Right.
right? Like it's instead recognizing like the Makasat works as it does, and now it's time to figure out what are the other factions. And so there's something interesting in my mind about the Keepers and the Hundreds as
Mhm.
being I don't know if I want to say late war kind of things, but
Yes.
the Hundreds has this kind of sparrows from the Game of Thrones thing where it's like, well, now that the elites have wrecked everything, now that there is no hope of any sort of lasting peace in the next 2 years, there arises this faction that's a little
Right.
nihilistic. And I'm wondering, like, when you were working on the hundreds, did you have a sense of like these might be the closest thing to the bad guys that exist?
Well,
They
they were a
literally have an
very.
oppressed thing.
I
They have
mean,
like,
it's funny when Patrick like first showed me the design for the hundreds, like the initial draft. My first thought was like, this is a Trump era design.
oh,
In the sense that it was like, oh, you're telling me there's like a belligerent authoritarian leader who like is moody.
it's moody. The
I'm like,
moods,
well,
right? Yeah, I hadn't thought
what
about
year
it.
is it? But
Yeah,
also there was a fundamental like kind of nihilism about it, and I think kind of going back to the sense of root going out and not down. Again, root doesn't go down because the past doesn't mean anything for root faction. Root factions they have a political calculus that gives them their way of getting victory points. That's all that exists. That's the only past that exists. The only past that exists is the past that they would need to convince their supporters of. Right, the Erie presents itself as a usurped former hegemon. That is a political move to make that statement, but is a move of the present. How long ago were they in charge of the forest? There's a productive ambiguity there.
well, and what's great about that from the RPG standpoint is you could say yesterday or you could say 50 years ago,
Right.
and both of those answers are true for your campaign. Like you get to pick which one is correct.
But this is a place where role playing games they ask a very different thing. Like when I was just kind of paging through the role playing book this morning, just kind of I was getting the mood, and when you build the vagabond, one of the prompts in the playbooks is like, who did you leave behind? Which is to say, what happened in your own past. And
Yes.
if you start asking that question in the context of an individual player character, then you also need to ask it like, what was
Yes.
this clearing like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 10 seasons ago, whatever. And I think that means that, we actually do need to start exploring like, what do these ruins mean? The factions that haven't engaged with the past, how are they engaging it?
Yeah.
And I think the ruin framework to me is really interesting because it allows, if you want to run the ruins in root as sort of like D&D sprawly, like never-ending dungeons, I think that you have a framework for that. But more than that, you can actually use them in a lot of different ways. And they become like tropes and like storytelling blocks that can tell a lot of different stories. So they aren't just, murder mazes.
Yeah,
Although you can
yeah.
have those too in the
Right.
game.
Well, so this is the funny thing is like when we start working on a new route thing, like, and we've talked about this before too. Like when you're working on a project, you get so deep on it that by the time it comes out, somebody will come up to me at a con and be like, "I love your new book," and I'll be like, "Do you mean Avatar? A book I finished 5 years ago?" And they're like, "Yeah, because I got it yesterday. It's new to me. I just received it, right?" And like I have to do this whole shift when I start a new project, like into that new project mindset. Like, okay, it's root time. Like I gotta like gear myself. I gotta get my books out here on my desk. I gotta like go play those factions I haven't played yet. And when I was playing the keepers, like I was like, oh my god, like this faction directly speaks to what the ruins are and what they hold and what they mean in terms of the past, right? Because the keepers come in, and we talked about this. They're not finding badger artifacts. Like there's
Mhm.
nothing badgery about the artifacts that they find. They're seeking the past in a way that I think is a little different than some of the other factions in terms of the past is real to them because it's not the past, it's the present and the future. Like we have to
Mhm.
go find these relics because they're beautiful, they're gorgeous, they're whatever, but then we want to take these relics and use them to win the war or protect those relics or do whatever with them. And as I was playing, I had one of those classic root experiences of like the other factions I think we were playing with the Lord of the Hundreds and I want to say maybe the Eerie and the Keepers. And so the Eerie and the Lord of the Hundreds are like the Eerie's like trying to fight off this populist Trumpian make the Woodland great again, you
Mhm.
know, and like which is terrifying. And the Keepers are like, could y'all just not get in our way? Like
Right.
we're just trying to pull these relics out. And as I started to get more and more victory points and get ahead, the other two factions were like unable to work together. Their interests were too opposed. And I was able to just kind of like pull enough relics and do enough things. So it's like, yeah, you guys are done because I have a totally different
Mhm.
worldview on this conflict. And the Erie just kind of felt like one of those governments that was caught between the populist present and this sort of academic almost future
Yeah.
of yeah. So like there's a really interesting emergent narrative that happened where the Erie felt like the the poor the poor failing elite government that can't figure out what it wants fast enough to join either side.
Right.
And so it's really like I was like really inspired by like, okay, this makes the ruins they literally make the ruins make more sense because there's
Mhm.
something there that's deeper than any individual faction can make, right? It's
Right.
not the same kind of thing of I made a nice suit of armor. The relics have a completely different political and social consequence than
Right.
a nice gun, right? Something like that.
Well, and this is a place where critically the relics do nothing for anyone else.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like they're like they don't have like a high utility or something, and that's really important because we wanted to create like not every object has to be fully I don't know fully
Fungible.
fungible. Yeah, I mean that's really it, right? Because I think um, this is a place where we're like a little bit bucking a design trend because and I think there's a lot of I mean in arcs a lot of the objects have utility across all the different plot points and like everything is like
Mm,
very useful. But part of the story, like sometimes in politics, a bunch of people care about something that other people don't care about.
beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. So when we talk about urban shadows, right, we have these four different circles, right? And they sort of mirror what it's like to work in a city where you have like a nonprofit circle and like a criminal circle and
Mm,
like a political circle. And you know that like, we call him from The Wire Mayor Carkitty because he looks like such a cat, like the
yes.
Aiden Gillen look. He looks like meow, like he's so
Yeah.
he's so cat like, right? But he has to interact with those other pieces, like the criminal elements and the nonprofit elements and the police elements, all kind of, but they have their own individual circles. And one of the circles in Urban Shadows is Wild, which is the fairies and the demons, and they're kind of
Mm,
immigrants. They're not from here, but the thing that really distinguishes them is that while the political factions, the wizards and the oracles care about the future,
mhm.
and the vampires and the werewolves care about like the present, like their street corners and their blood and their money and their all the things that are right here. Wild cares about what Wild cares about. Like
Yeah.
like we're collecting all the souls in the city for what? I told you what we were doing. It was for exactly the thing I just said. That's my job. I work for a demon. I collect souls. I'm not interested in the future. I'm not interested in the past. This is the thing I do, and I do it because it matters to me to do it. I am a creature of this worldview. And the
Right.
keepers have a little bit of that feeling, right? Of like, why are we collecting relics? Why are you asking such stupid questions? Like,
Right.
they're literally the most important thing in the entire world to preserve the history of a
Right.
people we have no real connection to.
And then like the other thing about the root factions, which I think again the role playing game does as well, is the root factions are designed to be like almost a little flat by themselves. It's only when they come in contact to the other factions did they actually
Yes.
develop any kind of depth, right? So like, you know, again, a character who is obsessed with one thing is like the worst kind of character to write. But when you
Yep.
put them in conversation with other characters, that's when you start getting, you know, interesting situations.
The Erie's looking at me like, will you please, large badgers in armor, help us deal with this populist uprising? And the
Yes.
badgers are like, I would, but I
Yeah.
can't. It does nothing for me. Like, there's nothing there. So one of the things we talked about with the ruins is really introducing this idea of the past, the mythic past, and talking about this kind of the ancients, right? These relics being made by people beyond our current craft skill. And I'm
Mhm.
curious, like, your historical lens, my lens, for those who don't know, is much more, I would say, currently political
Sure, sure, sure.
organizing, political leadership, political systems. What I always love about talking with you is this sense of like, what did ancient people or medieval people think about stuff like Greek fire or like these technologies that have been lost? I think that's a really interesting phenomenon of the time period the root emulates is
Mhm.
lost technologies that still have enough presence to be here. It would be like if you came across in today's world a a cell phone, a smartphone when nobody else has smartphones, right?
Right.
There's this, you're not even sure exactly how it works, but here is a Roman road, and it's pretty impressive, right? And like, what was that relationship like for
Well,
those people?
it's really it's weird, right? Because the thing about the Middle Ages, particularly, and this is something that the medievalists always harp on, and they're right to harp on it, is that no one in the Middle Ages knew they were living in the Middle Ages,
Right,
and,
right.
and so they have a sense of the past that is, and actually, I mean, well, I'll use a kind of a weird example to bring it into relief. There was an assumption that every creature that had ever been created that survived the flood, I should say, still exists. And so the notion that like something could have gone extinct was itself like a heretical idea that doesn't really come about until like the 1830s. You get Lyell writing the Principles of Geology and looking and being like, okay, so there's strata. We like kind of know how long it takes things to erode and to kind of build up. And there are a bunch of bones at this level of strata. Is the world possibly like really old? So when they're walking on a Roman road, it's
That's what that is such a great like moment for some human thinker to be like, I've heard that the world is fairly new, and yet this evidence in front of me is
but
very different.
he's looking at the cliffs of England and he's just like
Yeah,
counting layers. He's like, I don't know. It doesn't
like,
like it's like things are not quite adding up. And Lyle was a devoutly religious person and spent basically the back half of his career like being like, no, look, I think you can do this in a Christian framework. And other people were like, I don't know. It seems like you're kind of like upsetting the apple cart.
wow.
But that then
Yeah.
does a funny thing if you imagine like a medieval peasant walking on a Roman road. How are they? Well, they know that they didn't build the road. They know the road's been around for a long time. It's an old road, but that means actually like maybe the road's just kind of been here forever. So, the like time scale is like the present, the near past, and then like always. And so you don't get uh this extended past, and also you don't get the sense that they're living in like a dark age. That really comes about like in the Italian Renaissance, and people start saying like, oh, I think maybe we used to be more important than we are now, and starting to kind of piece that puzzle together. And so this again, this is very different from I mean, actually I'll give one more because I love like you
Yeah,
and
please,
Mark knows
please.
this. You've activated my like my deepest like historiography geek. But this is actually one that I only learned very recently. So Old English. So English, we have the modern English we speak, we have Middle English, which is like Chaucer's, like Wanda
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
April, right?
yeah,
Middle English.
yeah,
And then we have Old English, which is Beowulf.
yeah.
Um, in 1500s, so in the 1500s, this is again, we're not too far away from Chaucer. Let's say within, Chaucer's lifetime, a little bit after Chaucer, no one spoke or could read Old English.
So would they find documents that literally are like
Correct. And they
it's
would
like
they would just like rub them off and write new documents on them because they're like, I can't read this. This is old. And you don't get the emergence of Old English studies until the Reformation, which creates a desire to create an antique English history that is not Roman, that is not like aligned with the church. So you get all these people in essentially like the 15th and 16th century, well, the 16th century and 17th, saying, okay, can we figure out how to read Old English? And so they like are learning and kind of decoding their own language because the people who spoke Middle English didn't know Old English. And in fact, we who speak modern English understand a lot more about Old English than even the people who lived much closer to its happening.
no,
Right. So you
what's
get
funny
these like
from a
very weird like time ledges.
what you're making me think about is the really beautiful and heartbreaking book, A Canticle for Leibowitz, right? With the
Yeah.
sense
Yeah. That's
of like trying to imagine a future in which we wouldn't know the past, right? So, but then in my horror, of course, it's also talking to any child about what the save icon on a computer means. And
yes,
they're like,
exactly.
they're like, they're like, or like, you'll see some kid say, "Look, it's a 3D print of the save icon." You're like, "No, child, that is a floppy disk. That is how. That is the absolutely inanely stupid way that we used to transmit data from place to place. You would literally carry it from one computer to another, right? Meaning that, like, if
Yes.
I handed my child a box of floppy disks, eight tracks, you know, tape, right? Like she would not know. Maybe she knows what CDs are, but like
Right.
so much of the stuff would be like, well, I don't know what any of this means. Like throw it away. Like
Yeah, exactly.
there
Yeah.
can't be anything on it. Throw it away, right? So we'd like to think, oh, what fools these mortals be that they wiped away so much history. We don't keep track of
No, I
stuff.
mean, and like you're talking to kids, nephews, and things like that who like knew, like you're a witness to the technology. Now
Right.
imagine their children talking about the box of their great 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 grandfather's stuff, and
Right.
it's like utterly meaningless, right? And so like it really without the apparatus of like a university structure and of literacy and of like
Sure.
the discipline of history, we lose that ability. I mean, one other thing that all this, it's so funny how when you're reading anthropology, you'll sometimes find something where you're like, oh, this is like fractally true. This is true of like all human experience, even though it's being expressed in a very simple way. And the one that
Mm.
I always think about is like counting. So most if you a lot of non-literate societies with they have counting, they have 1, 2, 3, and then like mini, and then like a large mini, but which is to say, they have logarithmic numbers. So like they don't have linear numbers.
Oh, right.
So
Yeah.
like so they can express things as like, one, I can understand doubling one, I can understand adding, like a
Yeah.
50% to
Right.
that. And then after that, it's like a group, and then like an infinite amount, like a very large group. And so one of the like most critical advances in human thinking is the indoctrination for all of us into the number line, to like, no, I can count to 10, I can count to 20. And in fact, that giving myself linear steps, those integers that are advancing in even steps. And it is funny because I remember like when I was a kid in a math class learning like the word for integer.
Yeah.
And I was
And
like,
thinking,
why is this a word? This is,
right.
you just mean a
Sure.
number? And you're like, well,
Exactly. Yeah.
no. And then as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh no, that's a hard fought lesson to be like, okay, we're going to assume a single difference of value. We'll say from 0 to 1, and
Yeah.
then we're going to
Yeah.
keep compounding it.
Yeah.
And,
And we're
and
not going to get lazy or sloppy and go to a lot.
right.
We're going to keep compounding it infinitely.
So then you can take that when it comes to understandings of the past, because you're like, okay, I've got myself and my family and maybe like my grandpa, and then like the infinite past. it's just you're thinking logarithmically through time, right? And so like it's so funny, you know, we're talking about a board game with a bunch of squirrels that fight each other.
Yeah.
But if you start thinking about like, well, how are they actually imagining the past? And you know, does it end up mattering for you? And the answer, at least my sense, when it came to Roots, certainly, but also just broadly when it comes to world building, is it shouldn't matter in the way that like a lot of modern fantasy treats the past, where you get these like lists of kings and these like very like ordered, like perfect
Sure.
histories. And
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
and actually all of this is against what we might think of as like the canon. Because the canon is like a very modern humanist way of thinking about the past, where it's like, I have arranged the past for you. Here's the
Yes.
authoritative record of the past.
Well, that's kind of the downside of the university structure you talked about, right? Is that it has the potential to preserve, but its preservation kind of ossifies, right? It's funny that we both read Beowulf in college. We both read
Right.
Chaucer in college. It's not accidental that we both read those works, but
Sure.
now it's not accidental that we both think of them in exactly that same way of this represents this and this represents that. And so like it's kind of the downside of the university system is the ossification of knowledge, right? The sense of it will always be exactly this way, right?
Right.
And yet, of course, we have the option of no knowledge or ossified knowledge. And I think we, as two academics that make board games, we know where we stand.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
one is as far spirit of the other. But yeah, like you end up with this sense of like you have to compound that knowledge in a way that can then be taught and relayed and moved through multiple times, not just once.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
And the factions that are introduced through Marauder, which is I think the joy of game design is discovering this stuff. Like you put these two flavors together and they kind of work. They have an ironic kind of twist of the keepers are in that logarithmic scale, like interested in the ancient. They don't,
Yeah.
but and their own history of like, so you guys got kicked out of here, and they're like, yeah, like we totally did, and we don't really remember who was in charge. Like it happened so long ago that we're not like mad at the birds, right?
Right.
Like someone was in charge and we were exiled, but like that's like part of their cultural DNA of like don't trust elites. Like the people in charge, according to the keepers, I think are not to be trusted. Like they will
Yes.
always make the wrong decision for the people and for the woodland. And to some degree, the reason, because we always have to answer this question in the RPG, like, what's the difference between meeting one river folk otter who's selling
Yeah.
something at a trading post and having the river folk be a faction of your game? In the first case, there's a guy who wandered in from somewhere else.
Right.
He's got a boat. He trades stuff. He'll move you down the river. But in the second case, that faction has joined the war, and
Yes.
like they have some sense of wanting then to win the war. And for the keepers, when Brendan and I were talking about like how do we introduce the keepers, we really had this discussion of like what's the difference between the keepers in the background, as we put it in the book, and the keepers as active participants in the war.
Mm-hmm.
And as active participants in the war, it can't just be about relics, because if it was, they would just grab all the relics they could get and leave. But if they're committed to winning the war, then they must think about they must have some other deeper strategy, right? Whether that's the, as we jokingly call it, the infinite relic strategy. That when we hold the woodland, then we'll have the time to get all the relics.
Yes, correct. Yes.
You get infinite relics, right? But like, I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on these, like, with these factions, like the otters, I mean, the duchy and the Marquisate and the Erie are obvious, right? Because they're control factions, right? But you look at something like the Corby conspiracy or the otters or the keepers. What does winning the war mean to them?
No, and this is, to me, this is again, like I'm just going to keep calling on history, because this is the Riverfolk Company as a, like, what if we start getting taxation rights here and can play what if we start playing the long game with this particular territory? And the infinite relics thing, I mean, how many colonial powers have like had Egypt for a while? Right. I mean, they're playing the infinite relics game.
The infinite relics game. We're gonna explore every pyramid just as soon as we wrap up this war. Right. It's kind of.
I mean, Elgin might have carted off those marbles, but like if you had stayed in Greece, maybe you could have had the infinite, Greek relics play. Because I do think that like that's a really important frame. Like a faction that is in the game they are translating their personal goals into a political calculus the payoff of that political calculus is not something that can be answered in the scope of Root, but it usually has to do with whatever their core aims are. I mean, I think about like to use the cats as an example. The cats, despite getting a lot of crap politically, are really the good actors of the Woodland. They're trying to just move stuff around, build things. They don't need the cats don't need to hurt anybody to get their victory points.
Well, I mean, that's true about all colonialism.
Yeah, exactly. If no one's here. But then you have to ask the question like, okay, well, once they've got that, what does it look like? And it's like, well, it looks like what happens after Walmart has eliminated all competition in your small town, where it's like, well, now it's a controlled market. It's a very different situation.
Well, it's so funny, right? Because I think that we occasionally, as we have discussed before, get some pushback from the left, despite myself being a brown community organizer. We get some pushback on the left that I am a quote known centrist for having presented the colonial cats as not evil, right? And the irony I think of it is that like, so I wrote Cool Claw Mine, which is in the original clearing booklet, is a clearing in which the Marquesat is basically enslaving people to put them to work making farms because there's no food for the mine, because the Cool Claw Mine was part of an ecosystem of trade, and the mine would have ore and they would trade it for food, and because of the war that's broken down, so everybody's starving. And so the Marquesat is, has rounded up all the people who aren't working at the mine and put them to work breaking rocks to make a field to have food. And like, on one hand, I can't think of anything more horrifying than a government that can't mobilize people except through slavery, right? But on the other hand, they are trying to plant food. And I think that's like the real horror of colonialism, right? Is that it's got like a logic to it. Like, well, there aren't any workshops here. There aren't any mills here. We, the Marquesat, are going to build those things and give you jobs and make this clearing flourish. And all we ask is that you just basically give up your own political identity and just be us now.
Right. I mean, this is the problem with empire, and really with a lot of politics that is that it's motivated by an ideology that is outside of just real politics, right? Like it's not just power for its own sake. I know it seems a little strange in our own political. I mean, you and I are both in the US, where there's a lot of politics here is done just for the logic of political power. Without really thinking about what you're trying to do. And one of the like scary parts of empires is like, well, I mean, obviously that's true too, but a lot of these actors, they have a vision of the world and they're trying to build it. And there are parts of that vision that are exciting. Like, I love universal suffrage, right? That's but that is an idea that is closely bound up to the imperial project.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, all of you are going to be citizens of the Marquesat, and eventually the Woodland won't be the Woodland. It'll just be another province of the Marquesat, and that's it. Like, that's the pitch. And somebody who's like suffered under the birds, who lived for a while with like a bandit leader of this particular clearing, who has watched their friends die for nothing, here's this pitch of like, what if you were all citizens? And they're like, that sounds fucking great. Like, that is so much better than this other bullshit that all of these other actors have put me through, right? And yet, when the Keepers show up, or the Corvid conspiracy shows up, or the River Folk show up, is that compelling? Like, I actually like when the Keepers show up and they're like, here's what we're going to do. Everybody here is going to devote themselves to uncovering every relic we can.
Right.
I actually think it's like, you guys might not like the cats, but like, that sounds bonkers. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Who is signing up for the lizard cult? Like we're going to transform this whole clearing into a garden, and some of you are going to sacrifice yourselves for the greater good. Sounds kind of crazy compared to, why don't you join the Marquesat, an empire with rules?
Right, which is why like the Corvid conspiracy, like a lot of large conspiracies, is like fundamentally like without ideology. It's just about power, which is why it's so nihilistic. The hundreds is too. It's just nihilism with a figurehead. And strangely, you like look at something like the lizard cult, and you're like, well, they believe in something. You know, they're like.
Well, a lot of our lizard cult plots are really interesting when we do a lizard cult clearing, because what usually happens with the lizard cult clearing is you have a bunch of lizards who are true believers. There's no bigger problem in the world for politics than people who truly believe in something that isn't politically negotiable, right? Like, You can't be like, okay, here's the deal. You get to sacrifice somebody like every other week, okay? Not more than one every other week. Like the lizard cult's not going to go for that. Like they're not going to be
Right.
like either we're allowed to practice our religion or we're not. It's not. There's no half practicing our religion that's going to make us happy, right?
Mhm.
And so like I think there's a really interesting thing with the keepers and the hundreds where both of them end up interacting with the ruins because the hundreds will also loot the ruins in a way that no
Right.
other faction can, right? And yet the keepers are interested in this ideology that looks to the ancients, and the hundred, what is their perception of time? Yesterday?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
they have like the irony of the Trump era design, which I feel embarrassed that I've never thought of before until right now, is that the Lord of the Hundreds moods do not shift like once a game. They shift every turn, right? Like whoever's in charge of this populist mob is themselves an unstable genius, right? Like that's somehow they've gotten everybody to get on board with this, but they're not actually contributing anything. It's
Right.
just whatever their mood is for today. And I think it's one of those things where populism sounds, especially for the left, I think we like this idea. Like let's get in a bunch of new voters.
Right.
Let's have a populist movement. You know, Bernie Sanders is once again asking you to explore the ruins on behalf of the hundreds, right? But like populism, it's not historically, populism has not been very popular with liberal elites. Let's put it
Right,
that way.
right, right. And well, and I mean, I think again, this is where the compare and contrast is so effective in Root because the Eerie and the Lord of the Hundreds, they're both like large hordes on the fringes, but they behave fundamentally differently because the Eerie has to be accountable to its promises in a way that the Lord of the Hundreds does not.
Because
So
those
the Eerie
promises
is
were made
like
yesterday to
strong
somebody
party
else.
politics, yeah, strong party politics, weak party
Right.
politics.
Right.
Um,
The strong party politics of like, we have a coalition, we have this claim to authority and leadership that like we have to have some semblance of accountability, like you said, because if we're just murdering people left and right, people are going to say, well, you guys aren't really you're not the Erie I used to know. But there is no hundreds you used to know. Nobody's like, I can't believe the hundreds have abandoned their core principles of checks notes, burning shit down and murdering all of our opponents. Right?
right.
There's no downside to it, right? So one thing, I will take a break here in a minute, but I have a question for you. Like, what do you think the hundreds? If you were running Root the RPG and
Right.
you decided that one of the hundreds was one of your factions,
Mhm.
what would you do to make them compelling for the players to engage with in any sort of positive way? Because they're easy antagonists, but what do
Well,
they
sure,
do?
they are easy antagonists. I think the key is that your observation that like the hundreds and the keepers feel like latecomers, and so I think
Mm-hmm.
you have to think about what makes Genghis Khan compelling to like some small like petty noble, and it's that there's a sense of order that is being offered. I would really lean on the keeper is promising, and the Lord of the Hundreds is promising an end to whatever this is, whatever
Mm-hmm.
this mess is. And it really, we live in a time where that's increasingly embraced by people. They're like, look, I just want to feel like everything is stable. And so I think I would really lean on stability. And I would also, I think that it's easy to parody uh, whoever the top of that faction is, but you can also present them as someone who's charismatic and someone who is brilliant. Um, and I think in our own time, in our own the politics, especially the politics of a lot of people who play these games, most of the leaders that we have that make the populist moves are like parodic and we don't like them. But imagine if they were like a really wonderful,
Well,
perfect person.
for
Yeah,
for those of us at Magpie, you don't have to do that because we're not, like we're not a political organization, but we have a number of Mexicanos on the team, and AMLO and the populist movement in Mexico
sure. Oh, that's a
is
great.
it has a lot of comparison points to Trump. Sometimes he sounds like Trump, or sometimes he says things like Trump. But on the other hand, you know how badly the Erie and Muckazat fucked up Mexico? We're not like there's lots of room here for someone to come in and say, I'm just going to make things better by honoring the people. And if that
Right.
means I have to burn down the institutions that have not done right by you, well, are you going to stop me? Right. And I think
Right.
that there's something there where the hundreds are dangerous and clearly out of control. Like that's I think a part of the control part. They don't have the command and control that say that Erie does. Right. So like you said, strong party politics versus weak party politics. But I think that there's something really compelling about a faction that says, and are you tired of all the suffering?
Right. Well,
That's my pitch.
there was a question in the chat, which I'll bring up because I think it's a really good one, which is why are the denizens of the wood, why are they helping the keepers or the hundreds or anybody? And I think a faction that is in play for victory, the fundamental thing is they're winning by demonstrating legitimacy. So there's an overlap between what the faction wants to do and what is going to communicate victory to the people of the Woodland. And imagine a world, I mean, again, the artifacts don't belong to anyone. They're not even in the homelands. They're in the woods. The woods is like a hinterland. And so you're like, well, yeah, there have been people stationed here and they're doing kind of their own thing. And they go off to the woods and they come back here, but like they're pretty reliable. They're always here. I mean, it's a little bit like, I don't know, people who are doing development in like Southeast Africa, like the big Chinese corporations that come in and do these massive construction projects. And it's like, well, they're presenting as more stability than a lot of that might be presented by like the municipal politics. And if that company is then offering like trash collection services or something, you can see how the things kind of slowly start expanding. And that's, I mean, this is very much like empire in the context of the 21st century transnational corporation.
Well, there's something so hilarious here about like I did not have the Marauder faction as the make the Woodland great, or Marauder expansion as the make the Woodland great expansion, but it kind of is through two different lenses, right? Like the populist lens of what if we wiped out no gods, no masters? Like what? Why don't we all be vagabonds? Like why don't we a vagabond all, right? Where like we'll get rid of the cats and the birds and everybody. Like you won't have to answer to anyone except everybody else, right, in this populist movement. Or the keeper saying, what if we discovered our own history and our own path in the Woodland and we devoted ourselves to a kind of project, like the project basis you're talking about, of uncovering and discovering the ruins that have never been uncovered. Like it's kind of inspiring, right? And get away from the stupid politics of who controls this clearing. By the way, we need to control this clearing.
Right. Just so right.
Well, but like we're not just fighting over for nothing, right?
And this is really, I mean, this conversation is why I'm like sad that I'm not working directly on the new Root expansion right now. Just talking about this because Josh is working on it. But this conversation is why I adore Root, because Root, people always, tell me like, oh, you have historical games and you work on these like non-historical games. I'm like, no, you don't understand. The fantasy games are actually like, they're actually they're like historical because they're about all histories at once, and they're a sandbox where I get to play around with all these different tropes. Whereas when you're doing historical game design, you are setting a frame. I mean, it's a little bit like Cartel. Like Cartel has a degree of specificity, is what makes it powerful. And then you compare it to like the work you might be doing on a fantasy game, and you're like, well, the lack of specificity is what is allowing it to be.
It's Urban Shadows versus Cartel for me. Cartel is like, this is 2007's Mexico, so these things must be true. I am boxed in these ways, but the specificity is so powerful. But Urban Shadows is like, vampires are kind of a metaphor for a lot of different urban groups. But when I'm working on a new playbook, it's like, okay, who is the immortal? What do they represent? What faction of city politics do they actually represent? As I'm encouraging you to play this person from this perspective, right? And like one of the most powerful playbooks I've ever worked on is the Vessel for Urban Shadows, is like a Frankenstein's monster or a golem. And the idea here is that you've been made or built by someone for a purpose, and that purpose is either expired or you've shrugged it off. And for me, as like the children of immigrants, with this sense of, especially for Mexicans, it's like, please come in and build everything. Okay, now please leave. Like your usefulness has expired. Please exit the political system. That sense of being, you're not quite human. You're not judged as human by the group. I can't do that in an RPG in some sort of real way. That's not a fun story. Like I think about the movie El Norte. If you've ever seen that,
I've seen El Norte.
Yeah. Like just like this, like really basic story of what does it take to come to this country and what does it take to make it here. That's not a fun RPG. But now you're a golem. You're a Frankenstein. You're a statue that's been brought to life. find your humanity. That level of remove becomes an story now of what does it mean to be accepted as a citizen by the society in which you live? What does that cost? Who has to be Grendel? Who has to be outside
Right.
the circle, and who gets to be inside the circle? And I can't do that in Cartel. Like there's no the
Right.
specificity obviates any moves I would make to try to get at the sense of what does it mean to be a citizen, because you're all part of a drug cartel, so
Right.
none of you are citizens, but you're also more important in some ways than the government. Like it's a weird specificity. So yeah, I think people look at Molly House and they're like, well, that's the real historical work, and we're over here like, let me tell you about these badgers.
So yeah, exactly. Because I mean, the thing is, the stories that get told oftentimes are the ones that are attending to narrative concerns, and then the other stuff is still there. It's just sitting in kind of funny spots, and you have to figure out like the right lens to use. So you definitely need both sorts of things, but there's a limit. I mean, I think I've run into this a little bit because of like Ross Common's work on the City of Winter, where like
Yeah,
I love that game, but it hits like a truck and I cry when I play it. So I don't play it that often.
right.
Um,
Yeah. The
it,
Quiet
it,
Year is the same way. Like I always leave a Quiet Year game being like,
oh boy, yeah, it's just
like
that's
there's
just
it's heavy, right? Because nothing ever works out. It
right.
can't work out right in the same way.
And that and I think bringing up El Norte is a good example because El Norte is. I mean, I love that movie, but it's not super sophisticated, flashy, like super, intriguing in its narrative articulation. But it's still like a difficult text because there's just a lot to sort through.
Yeah. All right.
Um,
Well, let's take a break. We're going to come back for maybe not a full second hour because we're well into the campaign. But Cole and I are going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's coming up, what's exciting about the ruin, some of the mechanics of things, some of the new playbooks. So we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll be back to finish up some part of our second hour. Just to flag it, we're at 45K, which is pretty good for the first hour. So we've already passed our first set of stretch goals, meaning that we had a couple that were coming in at the beginning where we're doing Roll20. We had our new clearing booklet. We have unlocked the new set of dice, which is the vagabond dice, the hundreds dice, and the keeper dice, which are going to be a little mini pack that goes with your existing dice that we did in the first campaign. And then we're now working on our first playbook, which we'll talk about when we come back. So join us about 15 after the hour. I'm going to leave this up and running because I have no idea whether Twitch would restart the stream, and let's not chance it. So Cole and I are just going to mute every video
Perfect.
and take 10 minutes, and we'll be back. See you soon. We're back. Okay. So first of all, thanks Cole for being here. I know that we've gotten to do a couple of things together over the last couple of years, but it's been fun to have you here for the launch of the new Kickstarter.
I know that's first. I've never done one of these like pre-launch streams. They're fun.
Yeah. They're good.
It's
I
good.
think
It's
it's a.
good to have like a container to put all the nervous energy.
I know,
You know what
right?
I mean?
Yeah, like when we launch, it's a lot of like me staring at the screen and being like, wow, those numbers are higher than they were 5 minutes ago. And then again, in 5 minutes later, being like, and yet again, here they are, higher, right? So yeah, it's great. But yeah, I wanted to take a minute to talk about some of the things we're doing. First of all, the new Vagabond playbooks, right? So we've got some new Vagabonds, and it's always a challenge to create new Vagabond playbooks because we have to find whatever space hasn't already been painted over,
Mhm.
right? So like, especially when you get started, you're like the ranger, and that's going to cover like this entire set of things. And then later you're like, wow, I really wish the ranger was more specific, and we had 3 other playbooks we can do around the ranger.
Mhm.
But like we've got 19 playbooks in the existing material, and we're adding these 4 more to start. We just unlocked one, or we're just unlocking one new one, which is at 60K here. We're going to unlock the Nomad. But I'm curious kind of what your thoughts were on those first 4, having kind of seen us pitch them the hunter, who's got kind of a Witcher vibe, the gourmand, who's a cook, the let me see, let me find the list. The dealer, who's trafficking in important items, another kind of ruins character, and then the
Mhm.
scourge, who's basically Inigo Montoya, like who's got
Yes.
a revenge to pursue. What do you guys see when we send these over? Like, what do you guys think about them when you look at them?
Well, it's funny. We have when we're usually thinking about content design, we'll ask ourselves like, oh, is this a faction or is this a vagabond? Like whenever you have an idea, you're like,
Mm,
okay, what is the proper like box that this idea can fit into?
yep.
And the vagabond design is, I mean, it is actually like one of I mean, speaking very frankly about the core design of Root, the vagabond design is a what I would call a known problem of the Root board game
Really?
because people love the vagabond faction, except some people don't like the vagabond faction. But it's very and so like the people who play like tournament Root, you don't see a
Yeah.
lot of vagabond play. They're like really hardcore, like plus 50 games
Really?
of Root. You
Really?
don't see a lot of vagabond play. Both because I think I just think I think that at high levels of Root play can be a little difficult and also a little straightforward. And the people who are really good at Root are like, no, I need to like obfuscate my like path to victory here.
Well, there's definitely a thing we joke about whenever we're playing Root. That's like some other faction, one of you guys, got to punch that vagabond in the face.
Yeah, can
Somebody's
you
got to do it.
just anyone at the table, please? Not me, definitely not
Not
me.
me. I don't want to
Um,
do it because it's going to take up my resources. But
uh,
somebody here's got to do it.
but when I talk to people who come from a wargaming background, they're like, I really like Root, but like, the vagabond faction. However, when I'm at a convention, the number one faction that people want to talk to me about is the vagabond. People
Okay.
love,
Okay.
they
They
love
love
and
the
love,
vagabond.
love the
Love.
vagabond.
They love
So
the vagabond.
on staff, we have this funny thing where we have all these playbooks you all have designed, which are design. I mean, they could become vagabonds in the
Yes.
Root
Yeah.
board game, and
For sure. For
at
sure.
some point, many of them likely will be. However, not all of them can be, and that is in fact one of the great charms of the Root RPG because the gourmand does not like translate. So
Really hard. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the first part
Yeah.
of the story, I mentioned that there's always this pivot of moving when a faction is in play and going for the win in Root. They are making a kind of political calculus that is going to work for something like the Scourge or even the
Yeah.
dealer in certain
Yeah.
contexts.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
going to really work for the gourmand, maybe not work for the hunter, right?
Yep.
So I love seeing the vagabond designs because they allow different corners of the world to be explored, especially things
For
like
sure.
the domestic. Um, and so like I was so delighted by the design of the gourmand. And then Kyle actually, when you sent, so we have a brief conversation and then you send like the kind of overviews, we do approvals on them, and then I send them to Kyle as art briefs.
Yep.
And he had gone quiet for a couple days, and then on Friday he just sent like a one line message to the company Slack that was like, I think I've just drawn the best skunk I've ever drawn in my life. But he didn't share it, and he's like, "You got to wait. You'll have to wait a little bit for me to actually share it." And it is fantastic. Like all the character designs are really wonderful.
Yeah. They're let me show I'm gonna show them here on the page just so everybody can see them. But yeah, like I think like this obviously here at Magpie we have a big affinity for the Corbin conspiracy. And this bird who has just the most delighted face and this giant gem that they've clearly gotten from the ruins is also a winner. And we have a weird thing we have to do on our side, which is, like you're talking about, these aren't all going to show up in the board game, so you don't really need to think about the kind of creature they are. But when we lay them out on the table and we think about what's there, we don't really want to have there be all birds or something, right? So, and we
Yes.
want to also show that mice and foxes and bunnies can be vagabonds. There's nothing about, you don't have to be an outsider to the woodland
Right.
to be a vagabond. So we're constantly trying to figure out which should this be, like who is there. And so like for this, we're looking at the hunter and we're like, really need another bird. But like we already have a blue jay, we already have a crow, and Brendan suggested the goldfinch, and I think it just looks awesome. Like he's just so,
Yeah.
like he's so like the yellow and the black looks so cool next to the green cloak. He's got this like Aragorn Witcher vibe, right? Like
Yes.
it's awesome. But this skunk, man, like just A+ skunk.
Yeah, and I mean, it's in Kyle's favorite. Let me see if I can find it. This will be a fun test. I'll do this live. I have next to me, because I'm working on the Oath expansion, and I have all the Oath cards in stacks by suit. And so when I break something, I can instantly know how bad it's broken. But when I saw the Gourmand, I thought about this card. This is the Cracked Sage from Oath, which, like, I was, the idea was it's a wizard that's gone batty, but in this case he's also like cooking. And Kyle just drawing his characters in the kitchen is one of my secret delights. So the other thing I'll say about the design of these playbooks is they are about windows to exploring new content, right? And so, we've got monsters being introduced, and we have runes being introduced. So we need factions that are going to behave like in the orbit of those things, because you kind of want to kickstart the interactions that are gonna juice the campaign.
Well, and we also have like the Gourmand, for example. Like I think if it was just, oh, you're a cook, like that doesn't do much as a vagabond. You're still supposed to be like a. We always joke that they're all Fast and Furious characters. Like if you can't
Yes.
be that level of melodrama, like you can't be a vagabond, right? So the Gourmand thing actually is that you have a whole loop with the food that you make, where you're looking for ingredients. So it's a reason to go to the ruins, it's a reason to go to the deep woods, it's a reason to go pilfer the mayor's stores, right? You're looking for great ingredients, and then you bring those great ingredients, you make meals that will do things for your friends, like restore their exhaustion, do this, do that. But you can also make impressive meals for NPCs, and when you serve those meals to NPCs, you can win them over in ways that are kind of
Right.
unique to the Gourmand, right? So you've got this whole cycle of, yeah, Lord Scowl is a dick, but like, you know, he's he can win him over. Like you make him a tremendous meal, and now he's an ally, right? And that's like, what would that even look like on the board game? You have no. It would require
Yeah.
like a whole different. Like there's
Yeah.
no NPCs. It's just a totally different level.
Well, when we talk about the board game in studio, we'll say, like, one of the problems of designing Root is that everything has to come down to warriors. That you're always expressing
Right.
things in an action economy where, like, the only universal thing is like the warrior as a piece. And so of course it's always going to look like a little militant. The Gourmand too, the design I love too, is there's a way to play it very archly, where it's like the person who brings their victim over to cook them like a nice meal,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
while they're like unrolling their diabolical conspiracy or whatever. Like, I think that
Yeah.
there's just a very, like, you can orient it a little bit on the
Well,
James
you can
Bond
also the
side.
heisty side too of like, okay, Gourmand, you make them a fabulous meal while we go upstairs and steal everything, right? Like
Right.
that sort of like, here's your friend that's kind of not a thief, but is very useful as a friend of thieves, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And they're just, again, they're different ways of engaging with the world. And I think, and this to me is the, like, when you're doing board game design, you're getting people to engage with the core system of the game, but fundamentally it's pretty limited. We set our little posts up at the moment the game was designed. We can't really expand it because or we can't change the position of those posts because it will shift what all the other factions mean in a way that we don't. Like, we're not going to add, food or something. We actually had this this problem in a funny way with Oath, where I was looking at it and like, it'd be good if Oath like could handle like farming and like the actual like economic base of a of a state. And I'm like, yeah, but Oath just can't do that. It's just not a thing that Oath's built to do, and we have to, that has to be a different game. But with an RPG, because we do need to deepen and flesh out the world, the way that you do that is through these new playbooks.
Well, and I've told people before, but you could attest that we have not had a single meeting in the last 2 years in which I have not at one point said, "But what about some bats?" Right. And and the reason is because of this Envoy playbook. That is one of my favorite pieces of Kyle's art ever, is this adorable little bat who is working so hard to like make deals and bring peace while all of his vagabond friends make everything worse. This guy is trying to like make the woodland a better place, right? And I've heard from a little bat that there might be a bat.
There might be. We haven't like officially finalized the faction names yet.
Yeah,
so we have, but we have a bat faction, and it began. So Josh Earsley, who's been a long time developer of Root, he is like, if you've played Root, you have read rules that Josh has written, and you've probably played content that he's worked on the development of.
Which is funny because Josh actually used to be an editor for us like 10 years ago on Fate stuff.
Sure.
So we've been working with Josh for a long time.
And he, when he was working on it, he said, I want to make a Root faction that is a little weird and political, so more like the Riverfolk expansion than like Marauder. But he also said, like, look, let's talk about like the natural political order. So he had this idea of like, okay, the Woodland has some kind of political apparatus that it is operating on that is not dependent upon outsiders. So, but maybe they're not like the Woodland Alliance. Like, the Woodland Alliance is a radical group that is trying to like activate. But what is where is the desire to demilitarize? Like, surely there are people who are attempting to demilitarize the situation. And so we started building this out. And then we were talking about animals. Eventually, he had a conversation with myself and with Kyle. And eventually it's like, well, bats actually kind of make sense. They're here, but then they're kind of non-present. And then, at some point the envoy is entering that conversation. Bats like, well, and Kyle can say like, look, I did draw a diplomat kind of peace bringer. He happens to be a bat. A diplomat. And so then, this is the weird way where it's like, okay, a playbook in the RPG, maybe it's not a vagabond character. Maybe it's actually a whole faction. And then, these ideas kind of get rattled, back and forth.
And the thing here is like, the vagabond version of him is the one that's off by himself, doing his own things, doing it for himself, doing it for his own reasons. The faction version is the one that has a political project, right? That is like we are trying to demilitarize and bring an end to the war. Our victory condition is the end of the war. And this is actually a thing that I think we've talked about before, of the difference between, if anybody ever says to me, well, Root is a coin game, right? Like there's these counterinsurgency games. Like, there's some truth to that. But there's some asymmetry, the sort of modeling, this kind of conflict. There's no propaganda phases, though. There's no sense of victory is earned at a moment of checking. Root works on the sense of like, you get 30 points, you win. And I'm curious, like, that can lead to these places. Because the nice thing about the propaganda cards in coin games is you go through 10, 12, 15 cards. Each one is a round. When you flip over the propaganda card, we check for victory. And so if the Viet Cong is at a particular point in the Vietnam War, they win. If the Americans are at a particular point, they win. And yet they have to hold that point until they get to the propaganda card. But Root doesn't do that, and it can lead to the space where the Erie is totally falling apart, but it's crossed the 31-point line.
Right.
How does that work?
So in Oath, this is called like the war exhaustion win, or in the Napoleonic War, it's just the exhaustion, and it's actually a reaction to the fact that, having played a lot of coin, what happens is with good players, you get to the end. You're always going to the fourth.
We played a 14-hour distant playing game, and at the end, no one was really sure who won, and we're all mad at each other. And I think that is like it was the perfect. It was Afghanistan, right? Like
Yeah,
it was
exactly. They
like
did it. Right. And so I think, just in an effort to think about some of those problems in a smaller framework, well, like, look, I'm going to assume that we're like fundamentally this is closer to first past the post. And then the dominance cards are the way of like presenting those checks. But those checks are kind of only available to certain players at certain times. Like certain factions will have a much harder time winning on dominances. Although I've been surprised by the number of times people are like, yeah, I did a Corvid dominance. I'm like,
that's
cool.
incredible. How did you hold those?
How did you do it? And I think I've never seen it in the
and that.
context of a tournament game, but I know people have gotten close. They've gotten like half
Yeah,
impulse,
yeah.
kind of a way of doing it.
When you look at those tournament games, like, do people like? There's like a meta then, right? Like there's like
Yeah.
because people start to talk about how to win in the same way they would with Magic or something. Are there factions that like you have thought of differently now because of the tournament play and the discussion around tournament play?
So we did. I mean, one of the things that Root. So there's a cardinal sin in board game expansion design, or like what we might call like board game line design. So when you're thinking about design, not from the perspective of like a single game or expansion, but like how the expansion is going to work together.
Yep.
There's a cardinal sin, which is the line doesn't tell players how to engage with it. So like I've got a bunch of Carcassonne expansions. I have to do all this, like which one was the good one, which one combines with the other one. And that is bad because it creates friction as the product line grows. And so when we got to Marauder, my work on Marauder was really focused on the hirelings and the advanced setup draft system, because we basically said like Root is not telling players how to play it. So we need some kind of draft system. This is not for the beginners. The beginners who buy a new expansion and just want to play the faction,
They could just put the pieces.
You can just put the pieces whatever you want. But once you know all the factions and you've been playing a lot, you kind of need some way for the game to say like, how can we just build a scenario here? It's kind of like a scenario generator. And anybody who plays Root seriously, everybody uses advanced draft. That was really a reaction, and we put in some very subtle balance adjustments to the tournament play. So like, for instance, the cats in base Root are always starting in the corners of the map, and you kind of like choose your starting corner. The cats have an adjusted setup in the advanced setup with the advanced draft that allows them to put their keep anywhere and also gives them some extra warriors. That was a reaction to seeing how the cats were often getting played and how it interacted with the different maps. And it was a reaction to the tournament system. A few other factions got some very subtle power boosts. At some point, we have a set of Root rules that are used in the tournaments that are like very small scoring adjustments. At some point, we will fold those into the core game. It's complicated because of the size of Root's line. Like we can't just say like, I want to change this number or this one line of text, because there's just too many copies of the game in existence. But at some point we will have like, this is, you want your game to be tournament legal. Here's how to do it. It's weird because I think the thing that is, and this Kickstarter is a testament to it. The thing that is surprising about having a game that does well is that you don't get to stop working on it.
Right. Like, I mean, we said when we did these first two books, we're like, look, Root's not a big game. Right, it's not a big license. It's not Avatar. It's not Star Wars. Right, so we're only going to do these two books, and then watching the reaction of Marauders, getting these questions about the ruins. Right, like we put it off as long as we could, and then we were finally like, look, these players want this thing, and we're excited to fill this space in. I'm excited to have all these conversations about history with Cole about the hundreds of the keepers, right? So yeah, you have to keep coming back to it because that's where the work is.
Well, and it reminded me, I worked for this place called the Digital Writing and Research Lab when I was at University of Texas, and I was on this design team, or not design team. I was on this research team. It's a shift in language. I was on a research team. I was leading it, and the product I had was, should this research lab archive its past? So basically, we were moving offices. We had an office filled with just boxes of stuff that the lab had generated. And I was on a team that was basically, we had to answer the question of, should we archive it? And the answer that we came apart is, archiving is not a thing you do once. It is an active process. And so you should only bother archiving it if you are going to staff an archive, an archivist who is going to
Yeah,
be
good point.
responsible for maintaining the history. And you know, any like Coca-Cola, they probably have a staff. I mean, I know they have at least one, but they probably have a staff of corporation librarians whose responsibility is to maintain, you know, Coca-Cola's
So
institutional
I
history.
grew up in archives because my mom is an archivist. So she actually is a public historian and ran the political archives at UNM for a long time. And so I grew up in the stacks of boxes that you have to go through, and worked for a little while for her where you go through a whole thing and you're like, here's a memo that's just, there's nothing here. It's a piece of paper. It says, I'll see you at 2 o'clock or whatever. Put that in that folder. Okay, this is an important memo that outlines this thing. Put that in this folder. And you got to sort through everything and actually process it. It's not just enough to throw it in a room somewhere. You have to process that archive and make it useful for people at some point,
Mhm.
right? And so,
Right.
yeah, you're constantly having to do that work.
Right. And that, and sometimes I feel like my relationship with Root is to help, like, you know, the fans are like keeping the little flame burning, and our goal is just to make sure that it burns like as well and as long as it can.
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
and that just creates a very different orientation about these products. And so, for example, like when Patrick originally asked me about working with y'all for the RPG, my first impulse was like, no, we don't do RPG. That's not what Root is. This is a weird project. I don't know who these people are. And
right.
then what I did was I looked at all the games that y'all had worked on before and was very taken by them. And then also I just started asking people like, hey, would you play like a Root RPG? And all these people said like, yes, I want to play a Root RPG. And then around the same time as that conversation happened, we did the Marauder campaign, or like the not the Marauder, the Underworld campaign,
Yeah.
which might have been like right after we started talking. I think it was like 20. It was
Yeah,
around the same time.
it was really close by. Yeah, yeah, it was really close to it.
Um, but that campaign especially, like, it changed my entire relationship with how Root worked, because I'm like, oh, I have had my lovely time with Root. I love working on Root, and I'm happy to like be the Root czar. But what Root is way bigger than my own and personal interest in like what made Root, and it's important to that it gets to grow and thrive in its own.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of like whenever I see people talk, it's so interesting, like reading about fandom from this side of the fence, Mark. I'm sure you've had this too, where like, you know, when I was growing up, the fact that like Lucas didn't seem to care about Star Wars anymore always like really bothered me. And now I'm
Mm.
like, well, no, he's letting it just be its thing. So yeah,
We talked about this when we were talking about the working on this book, right? Is that like I used to think making a book was Mark going and writing a book. And I got home from work about 3 weeks ago, and my partner asked me how is the book going or whatever. And I was like, it's great. It's coming together great. I mean, I didn't write a word, but like I got all these other people to buy into what the book is doing and how it's going to work. And this section, we got this section this time. We play tested this thing. We did that thing, and you end up. I think you said in our last call, the job of a producer when you're a child seems like total bullshit. Like there's a director, there's a writer, there's actors, there's set people, and then there's this guy who, what did you do? Put up money? Like
yeah,
what is his? What, he gets a whole credit for that? And then as you get older, you're like, no. It's the creating the space for everybody else to do the work that is actually a really vital part of making any art. Who gets to who gets to do the work, not just by choosing them, but who's protected enough and funded enough to do the
mhm.
work of making a game is, I mean, so what Root does in terms of like, people ask us, well, why are you using Kickstarter? You're an established company. It's like, okay, look, first of all, no tabletop games company
This
is
is
really
step.
established in any way, right? Like every single project we do is really throwing something out there in the world and seeing what happens. And when it comes to these Kickstarters, what it really does for us is it shows us that there is enough people out there to keep doing the work in this line. And Magpie has never done a supplement on Kickstarter before. This is our first one. We were founded almost 15 years ago, and this is our first supplement on Kickstarter. And part of that is because a lot of our games that did well did not do well enough for us to say we definitely can do a supplement, and we definitely know it's going to have an audience. But Root is that kind of game. So we can say
Mhm.
there are so many people out there who are excited about root. We know we can do a supplement, and seeing that, having that continue to be true, right, is a part of why we do these. Is there enough interest and excitement out there for us to continue to do this, right? So it doesn't seem like, I think most fans don't think you and I sit around and ask that question, but we do.
Oh yeah. No, I
We
think
very, very much do.
nothing gets taken for granted over
Yeah,
here.
exactly, exactly. So, well, I wanted to wrap up pretty soon, but we're about to hit the $60,000 stretch goal. So why don't we hang out for that? That's a
All right.
pretty good thing to do, and talk a little bit about clearings, because it's like the one thing that we probably haven't chatted about that's in the new book. I mean, obviously the ruins, we talked a little bit about that, but like really having monsters and ruins, what that does for the game, right? I think it's kind of obvious. It's worth saying that what monsters are in some ways is a way to have adventures and conflict that don't default back to a social space, right? So when you've got a bunch of ants, giant ants, and you're running from them in the tunnels, you're not also like, but then now the Marquisat's going to be like
Hmm.
after me from this point forward. This is a space of pulp adventure that we're kind of creating with it. But clearings in general are a kind of unique tool because they're not an adventure, if that makes sense. Like they're not,
Yes.
like we don't come to you guys and say, okay, the vagabonds will do this, and then they'll do this, and they'll do this. So when we send over a clearing and we're like, here's a messy situation wrapped up in this one location. How do you guys see that within those bigger political questions of root?
So I think here I have to like be slightly biographical, and because the first time I read a clearing guide that you guys had sent a draft, I had actually never read anything like it in the role playing space, because the only D&D adventures I had ever read were essentially, I mean, they read like video game hint guides, where
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
this yellow key, this door, you open that, this treasure chest. And then when I read a clearing guide, I was like, what is this weird object? Because I mean, again, coming from wargaming, I'm obsessed with questions of scale and perspective. And so I was originally, I quite liked it because I thought, oh, we're getting a level of zoom that's good, because it's grounding. It's allowing us to see the world on the ground level, so we're getting it like through vagabond eyes. That's important. And then critically, the clearing guides are just messy little ecosystems. They're like it's like a miniature game of root presented at the scale of the vagabond, that then takes place in kind of one clearing, and it uses clearings as like the atomic set design. And actually, since then, I've learned a lot more about RPGs. And like when I'm reading, especially some of the older, like Keeper on the Borderlands or something, where you're like, oh, actually, a lot of these campaign supplements are like that, where they're like, look,
Yes.
here's what's going on.
Here's the situation at this extremely weird fantasy setting.
Right. And then once you have that, the players get to like pull little levers, move stuff around, and it's actually it's really neat. So the idea of the clearings and how they're using the game, I think, is awesome, especially because you can so easily just drop them in. And because they exist. I think here's the thing that I'm gonna express this a little bit more clearly. So when I'm running like an old school Essentials game, I will sometimes drop scenarios from other supplements in the same world. So I'm like, look,
For
this is
sure.
the wilderness campaign
Yeah.
game we're playing, and like, look, it's a Newsome written dungeon that I'm just like, it's in the corner, and people who have played multiple games with me will know, like, oh, this is a different corner of this. We actually played versions of this dungeon, or like they'll run
Right.
some of the same characters, but critically, it's not really being held together by anything except by pulp, by
Yeah.
the conventions of pulp.
Yeah.
What the root clearings have as an advantage is you'll have the Erie in one clearing, and then a bunch of things will happen, and then you'll run another clearing, you'll see Erie, and you're like, oh, there's a larger structure here that
Yep.
isn't just like the idea of a goblin. Like, no, they have affiliation, they have meetings at night.
This is the thing about it, right? Like when we were actually, a lot of the root design came out of Brendan and I brainstorming ideas to kind of update Dungeon World with new PBTA technologies, because we were like, okay, Dungeon World, one of the first PBTA games, showing its age in a couple spaces. I know they're doing a second edition, which is really exciting. But like there were a couple spaces where like, I don't know, like the whole like having hit points, like that's not really we don't do that very often because it's a particular kind of game design and it doesn't really make a lot of sense for PBTA in our mind. But these harm tracks, like we could do like these different harm tracks. We could talk about harm in a couple different ways, like fear and morale and injury, of course. But like, what do those look like? And when we started talking about root, we were like, you know what? You know how people actually play D&D most of the time? They're a group of weirdos and heroes and vagabonds and odd people who wander from town to town and like have adventures and piss people off and are the heroes sometimes and the villains other times or whatever. And then they wander on to the next town. And if you're a really good GM, what you have to somehow do is figure out how to get them to go back to the first
Hmm.
town so that they
Right.
can see the outcomes of the thing that they did and so that there's some holding environment. Otherwise, our heroes just miraculously never encounter the consequences of their actions. They
Right.
break this town and then they move on. And what Root gave us was a way to say, well, there's only 12 towns.
Right.
And those 12 towns, they have some super political structures like the Marquisate or the Corvid Conspiracy or the Keepers or whoever that are going to hold your reputation like a variable that updates, right? Like
Right.
they hold that data such that when you run into someone at the next town, they're going to remember that you killed Lord Scowl and left his body in the middle of the clearing with a note that says death to all cats, right? And now they're like, but you get like, I'm not. These people are under arrest. So that whole sense of the clearings and the woodland as being what we would call the holding environment, the instant pot in which all the stuff is happening inside of at very high temperature. That was like what made Root so exciting for us is that you get all the benefits of D&D of like, yep, we're a bunch of vagabonds. We no lords, no masters. We do whatever we want. But the consequences of a stable holding environment where you
Hmm.
have to come back to the same political institutions and the same places, and then the clearings slot into that to give you reasons to be there.
Well, and I think I have this like Root has a critical limitation about perspective here, which is, it can tell stories at the kind of high level, but then it doesn't have a lot of, characters. I mean, I again don't use proper nouns in a lot of the games that I work on because
Yeah.
I need
Yep.
the players to be providing those. And I have so much I'm always so jealous of you RPG folks, which is the ability to like come up with a good name that like feels in world.
Yeah.
Um, because I could never do it. They all just sound like bad Tolkien ripoffs, which they are. Um, whenever I do it, but the clearings then say like, hey, this is like a labor camp. Now, Root doesn't have explicit labor camps in it, but they of course can imagine how they would work, or like, and this clearing has an old mine in it, and this clearing has X or Y or Z, and um, that like so it's actually doing world building at the proper scale, as opposed to a world. And you can imagine, not to cast shade on other RPG writers, you can imagine a version of this book where the section on the marquee history is like 20 pages and
Right.
you're learning all this stuff that does not matter. And
Yeah.
I think to me it's one of the biggest as I've gotten more into contemporary RPG writing, the RPG books that are like, it's in the genre of the failed novel, or it's like, here are my setting notes and let me tell you about like the lists of kings and things like that. And it's like, look, I'm not, no shade on lists of kings.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I love a list of king, but you have to recognize that it doesn't matter in the context of a role playing game, usually.
Yeah, it's really one of those things that I'm always fascinated about in terms of people's evolution through the space. Like when you start playing RPGs, especially if you start with D&D or you start with Vampire, like a lot of places people come in, people think that the GM's job is to know all the things. So when they think about what they would want as a GM, they would want to be told all the things they need to know to run the game. But
Mhm.
there's also another movement in RPGs that really probably comes from early 2000s indie design. I mean, there's stuff before, but like really explicitly is enunciated with this sense of like story now. What is the story? Like when we're
Yeah.
telling a story, watching any movie, anything, we're not actually, the Silmarillion is not a great story to have a movie be made of because it's like a Bible, right? Like it's like a setting Bible. It doesn't really illustrate like how we experience drama. right? Like which is with characters that are doing things in real time, right? That's like kind of the key of stories. And so when I think about like, okay, what do I need as a GM to run things? What I need is people, whether they're bird people or cat people or crow people or otter people, whatever, who are doing things in the space in real time. Like these are the goals of these factions here in the moment. And a big part of the sort of goal of clearings is to ground those factions into the goals they have right here. So like you said, labor camps, not a Marquisat thing. It's not a thing they do across all the clearings. It's a thing happening in this clearing because this leader thinks this is a good idea within this space. And I think that's one of the ways that the RPG is really exciting is you're never going to get the RPG is not a great place to play out the whole war, etc. Like I think that what we're actually looking at is it's a great place to play out your space, your
Right.
those character stories in the original space.
Right. And I think, one thing that makes me very excited for this particular supplement is it the two missing pieces, which is like what is going on with the ruins, and then are there non-political actors who are still like creatures, are both getting like fundamental answers.
Yep.
Or not and again, not answers in the way that there's a single answer, but there is now a space at which
Yeah.
the answers can
Right.
be put into.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that to me like really rounds out the like core, the kind of core picture of
Well,
the
let's talk
world.
about the ruins just for a second before we break, which is I am really excited. Like we're going to release some mechanics maybe a little later this month or right after the campaign ends. Those are just the deepest, so they're the ones most being finalized. The idea of delves, right, which is this idea of both of really drawing that language from the keepers, right, who have as
Right.
an explicit mechanism, right, we're going to go delve, right, is this idea that going into the deep forest, going deeper into the ruins near the clearing, pushing past the known boundaries is a space that vagabonds are uniquely suited to do, right?
Right.
Because nobody else can do that work, right? The Makazak can't throw an infinite number of soldiers into scouting the forest, half of whom get eaten by giant bugs. Like it's not
Right.
worth their
Right.
time, right? It's not worth their time. We're going to hire some vagabonds to go do that stuff. But the way that the delves actually function is they're a little bit of like at their core a push your luck mechanism, which is the vagabonds have to invest resources to push on deeper into the forest, deeper into the ruins, but then think about how long it's going to take to get back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they capable of coming back from the depth that they get to? And the irony of this is that this is actually a thing I've wanted to do for a long time that I could not find a space for, which is I really love Subnautica. Have you ever played Subnautica?
Yeah.
Like the
Sure.
thing,
Sure.
like
Sure.
yeah. So like this idea of like you as a player thinking about pushing boundaries. How far can I get? How much can I get? Right? And how rare that is in game design to not have like it's very common in like you're playing Yahtzee, push your luck, roll it 3 times, whatever. But like in RPGs, push your luck mechanisms where you're like, I think we can go a little further, are really, really rare in any sort of explicit terms because I think that people the narrative frame is usually not there. Like social conflict is not usually a push your luck thing, right? Social
Right.
conflict is navigating other people's perspectives and your own. But what's really exciting about the ruins and the forest is they have this sense of vagabonds are unique actors, meaning that they're capable of doing this. It's not just foolish. It's not there's no chance of your success. But the vagabond's luck is not eternal, right? Like they have to how far are you willing to go? And I'm kind of curious for you thinking about the ruins as getting deeper or the forest is getting deeper, like what do you think that means to the setting of root? Like is that a space where you have the Marquisate, you have the Erie, and it's just sort of like they don't think about that stuff.
Right.
But the vagabonds do. Like there's an interesting kind of tension there around how did the Marquisate and Erie change because of factions like the Hundred or the Keepers.
Well, there's like wilderness is wilderness until it can be exploited in some way, right? And so like part of it is like they are scouting out places that in the current political calculus can't be cashed in for any particular reason, but
Yes.
the explorations are the things that change that. They like, I mean, critically, like you're doing map building, and it's a good example of maps not necessarily being be built out, but to be built in, right? I mean, it's not impossible to imagine like the finding of a clearing. right, in the same kind of framework, or
We
something that could
started to
become one.
add in some goals for vagabonds. Advance when you open a path between clearings. Like that could be a
Right.
thing your vagabond invests in.
Yeah, and it's a place where, again, on the time scale the RPGs are working in, at that closer level of Zoom, you can actually tell those stories, because in the context of the board game, it's really difficult to sort of do that work. Although the mountain map allows some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have found, I think as I've gotten like a little bit older, maybe liking, if I'm playing like a classic dungeon crawl style role playing, which I don't do too often, I really like wilderness campaigns because they have logistical questions. And then when you get to the dungeon, it's like very simple. It's like, oh, we just got to get the thing. We got to deal with the baddie. But
Yep.
like, oh, the fact that we're in this part of the woods and like the river is only flowing one direction very strongly, I can't quite figure out the way of getting back. It creates these push your luck moments, which to me, that is like such an essential part of how good stories work, where it's like, once we're here, how do we get back home? And really, the more structuration that you can put around that, the better those narratives are going to be.
Well, and I think it all ties back to the core mechanics, which is that ideally, when the vagabonds are done with an adventure, they have a sack of gold, an item, a relic, a thing. We haven't talked much about relics, but like that's a thing we're starting to play with here. This Valerian steel idea, the stuff that's beyond what is known. They come back with a bag of gold, a gem. They got a hawk, somebody that's willing to buy it, a relic that they might want to keep for themselves. But they've also marked a bunch of wear, some injury, and some exhaustion, and I got to find a patron who's going to fund the next adventure, right? And that sense of being spit out back at the clearing with a bunch of boxes marked that motivate you as a player,
Mm-hmm.
not to like play to lose or something. You're not like, I need to make some trouble as a vagabond, but like you could totally be within your vagabond's own worldview of like, I just need to turn this coin into
Mm-hmm.
new gear, a place to sleep tonight, and then the political problems of the clearing become the obstacle you've got to overcome to get that rest. Like that for us is what we're always looking at. How do we push people back to the core play cycle of
Right.
you're a vagabond, you do jobs, you take on jobs, you do heists, you make trouble, you fight revolutions, but at some point you got to deal with all this stuff you've marked. And how are you going to clear it and get back to normal? And that cycle of going on adventures, coming home, going on adventures, coming home, but not having one home base, but like the clearings being home as much as you can take it before you move
Right.
on right to the next clearing and the next adventure. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
I
well,
think they're really neat.
on that note, we have passed the $60,000 stretch goal. We've unlocked our first new playbook, which is the Nomad, who's somebody coming from outside the Woodland. I believe we'll have to post some art for it later, but there's a lovely lemur, I believe, that Kyle has drawn. Oh, no, sorry, the orphan. We're doing the Nomad later. Spoiler. The orphan, who's a proto vagabond. He's learning to be a vagabond on the road with the other vagabonds. And then the new map, the lake, which is coming up here at 80,000. So again, Cole, thanks so much for being here, man. This is
Oh yeah,
awesome.
this is a lot of fun. I'm gonna have to see if I can con some people at Leader Games to do this for our next campaign, because
Oh,
I
absolutely. Yes.
I have a lot
Yeah.
of time. Well, these
Yeah.
little lead up streams. Well, good luck on the rest of the campaign. I mean, I love, I just love seeing the good energy for the. I mean, there's nothing. And I've told this to you a million times, Mark. I love nothing more than when someone walks up to me at a show and says, "Oh, hey, is this board game related to the role playing game?" And I think, yes, this is. It is related. It is related, and I'd be
There,
happy to. This has been such a wonderful partnership, and I'm just so excited to see that the campaign is doing so well.
there's nothing. It's absolutely fascinating to me when my version of that is when somebody walks up and goes, "What is roots?" Just like has
Yes,
never heard of it before, and the moment of just being like, well, let me tell you, it's pretty cool, right? Like that is, you don't get that you don't get that moment a lot in gaming to
right.
just be like totally uncynical, totally just joyous and naive and about to be introduced to something that's going to make them smile for a whole lot of sessions or a whole lot of games. It's pretty exciting stuff. So thanks a
Yeah.
lot, brother. We'll see
Hey,
you soon.
my
Peace.
pleasure. Take care.
Bye.